Welcome back to ZA Confidential, the podcast where we talk about interesting things and sometimes sip a bit of wine. Today we're mainly waffling and doing a bit less whining, but hopefully it will be of interest because our topic today is a very, very important one for all of us, close to our hearts, closer to our livers. How do we keep South Africa's winelands and restaurants going? The background to this is very simple. There was a serious lockdown. There was prohibition on the sale of alcohol. There's still a curfew on how late you can sit in a restaurant at night. These industries have been devastated. The winelands are in crisis. The restaurant industry is in crisis. Can we do anything about it? Well, today I'm joined by a few experts. Not necessarily experts in today's topic, but experts in how to survive in prison and all those important things. We have Professor David Bullard sitting down in the Stellenbosch area, sitting on a wine farm, I believe, David.
Well, I mean, where else in the Stellenbosch area? I mean, obviously.
Poor chap. We have Michael Olivier, who is a wine writer, a wine drinker, wines a lot himself. He's our food and wine guru. Michael, great to chat to you.
Thanks so much, John.
In Midrand, I believe, we have business consultant Dwayne Newman, who is very bright on business-related things, and we'll see if he's got any insights for us today. And we also venture abroad to an exile, really, James Lennox, who spent a long time in Klerksdorp and then for some reason left it. James, great to chat to you.
And to you, John, good to see you all again.
And finally, a word of thanks to Malcolm McDonald, who's doing all the technical side of this. Okay, let's just get on with it. Michael, you're very close to a lot of people in the wine industry. You've run restaurants yourself. You know the business well. How much is it suffering?
I think it's suffering way more than we think it is. I think that a number of restaurants have simply closed down and disappeared. I think now that people can at least travel to the winelands and people can buy wine from wine producers, I think that has eased the lot a little. I still think that over the next months we're going to see the disappearance of a number of wineries, of a number of restaurants in the winelands, sort of in the towns of Franschhoek, Stellenbosch, Paarl, moving down towards Somerset West as well. I think things are bad. I admire some of the people who have done very different and very exciting things in order simply to keep themselves in the public eye rather than get people to come into their restaurants. I admire people like Spear who deliver, De Grendel who deliver, and I think really it's a battle, and I think it's worse than we have been led to believe it is.
Mr. Bullard, you live down there. Sorry, Professor Bullard, you live down there.
Yes.
What's the mood?
I think Michael's spot on. I was talking to some friends of mine who are in Franschhoek, and a couple of restaurants seem to have closed down there, but to their surprise, other people have moved in to start up new restaurants. So, you know, there is quite a lot of resilience. Whether that business returns, and, you know, before we went live, Michael and I were just saying that with no international flights coming in, the swallows who would normally be arriving in September, October with lots of nice euros, dollars and pounds will not be arriving. And those are the people who really keep the premium end of the market going, John, both from wine buying, you know, the premium wines, and also from the restaurants. And I think we're seeing a movement away from the 7-course or the 10-course, you know, wine pairing meal for a vast amount of money to the locals here want actually just good grub. They want to go to a restaurant, they want the ambience, but they probably want 2 or 3 courses, but they don't want to have to go and get a pizza on the way home because they're still hungry from tiny portions. So I think the trend is going to be moving towards that sort of restaurant that's going to offer sort of family value and also a little bit of ambience for those special nights out.
So the swallows aren't swallowing. Okay.
No, certainly not.
Dwayne Newman, you know how to rescue businesses, you know how to keep businesses afloat. You yourself have actually run a catering establishment. Are you as much in despair as the rest of us? Do you think there is hope? Do you think that places which are on their knees might gain a bit of traction eventually?
Yeah, John, I mean, obviously it is really challenging out there. I mean, I'm speaking to businesses every week who are going into business rescue, not just in the restaurant industry. I spend a lot of my time in dealing with manufacturers, right? And you have to understand it's all about a value chain, right? If you start closing off value chains, okay, what then happens is it's like damming up things, right? So certain industries just really struggle, not because they're inefficient, not because they've got too high overheads. They are really struggling to get their supply chain going out and also coming in. So if you get all that kind of stuff wrong, so you can have a good business, good clients, but if you've got a challenge with cash flow, and that's been, I think, probably the biggest lesson to any business over this time, is if you've got cash in the bank at the beginning of a crisis, you can ride out the problem. If you don't, okay, it doesn't take long for the doors to close. So I think what you'll be finding here, probably in the Cape region, would be businesses and restaurants which didn't have the cash resources at the beginning of lockdown, and they just run out of cash. So they can't keep their own momentum going, and eventually they have to close their doors down. Now I'm in an office park here in Midrand where they had a sort of good little restaurant in the office park. It was doing really well over a 5-year period. Had built up a good client base, was starting to become profitable, and in 3 months it's dead. Okay, had to close, retrench, and nothing that they did, just really their clients haven't come back, right? Okay, because they're all working at home, and that business had a captive market, so really profitable business, but dead in 3 months. So it's really sad.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Dwayne. I remember you once bought me lunch there. It was a long time ago, but you did once buy me lunch there.
Yeah, so I mean, the owner actually then actually moved down to Clarence and bought a brewery in Clarence. So we're going down there soon.
I will look forward to Heidi in the boot when you head down. Okay, moving offshore as we can through the wonders of modern technology. And James, I'm sorry I invited you to this discussion a bit late, but it suddenly occurred to me, why can't we bring in somebody boring and obscure from some little hamlet in Britain where they have dead popes and saints buried in their local parish church? James, are you I know that you have your network still within South Africa because you were heading one of our great business organizations here. You were also active in all sorts of other stuff. Are you getting a message of desperation from the Cape wine industry saying, buy South African wine? Are you seeing promotions everywhere? Is the industry trying to save itself? James, I think you're
technology. I've not seen anything about South Africa at all in any respect here in the UK. We know about what's going on in America and what's going on in France, but anything, I think, south of the equator doesn't really exist at the moment, other than Australia and New Zealand and China. But we've been doing our bit. I think the impact on your local businesses down there, we've still got family in South Africa. They are struggling with their businesses. The people involved in my daughter's wedding are all in South Africa. It's been postponed for a year. And whether or not it takes place there, to the extent that I've got a very large family and we've got an extended family, and they were all going to South Africa this October and possibly next October to Cape Town for the first time ever. And they're quite well traveled. And they have set up, or were setting up, great visits, excursions, the wine farm. Apparently there's a train somewhere that takes you to the wine farms or something. I don't know if that's true. That's what we're told here.
Yeah.
I said, I can't remember that. Mind you, I can't remember most of the wine farms I went to in South Africa. And it's a great pity that you're missing out on all this business. And I mean, these guys were going not just for the wedding, they were going to make a 2-3 week stay of it. And that's just a small awareness I have of it. We do still have the South African wine in most of the shops here, but as I said before, as far as promoting South African wines, I see nothing. Unless it's at the high end, which the vast majority of people in this country don't go to. Tesco's and Waitrose and M&S have a nice range. I don't know if it's any good, but it tastes nice. And I think that's one of the problems. And then you get the thing about it being transported in bulk to Germany and then bottled in Germany or bottled in France. And that affects people's attitude to it for some peculiar reason. And the way things are going with Brexit, that may impact you negatively with regard to if they impose tariffs on us, then there's going to be tariffs on South African wine coming here via the EU as opposed to direct. So in this country, there could be a number of issues that are going to affect you. And
okay, Dwayne, without going into the intricacies of tariffs, because we have a fairly wide listenership, how much does what James said worry you? Because it worries me. I would have thought our industry should have been on the starting blocks long ago, should now be as active as possible, given travel restraints, in making sure that the message gets out there. South Africa needs you drinkers. Drink South African.
Yeah, I think there obviously has been, some businesses have been quite slow to react to go, I suppose, online. Okay, some businesses have been much quicker in responding and changing their business models. And I know even in the South African context, I work with a company called OneCart. Okay, and sometimes about timing, right? I mean, they were building up their business, and as soon as lockdown hit, they were ready, and they've got now big joint ventures with Massmart and delivering stuff, and with Dis-Chem, and they obviously done fantastically well. So I think there probably is something to say around, is the South African wine industry, have they gone online? Are they marketing online like they should do? And clearly it sounds like from what James is saying, that the answer is no.
Michael?
I'd just like to echo something that James said. My understanding is that a lot of bulk wine does indeed go to Spain. I wasn't aware that it was going to Germany and to France, but there are wine bottling plants in the UK. There's one owned by Accolade down in Bristol, and there's a business called Greencroft where they also do bottling. And I think our people who are sending bulk wine may well switch to bottling in the UK. Having said that, I've now forgotten what the question was.
Well, the question was, is the industry as active as it should be in promoting itself, in getting our wines onto the shelves and out of the shelves in the UK? We have James in the UK, says he hasn't seen any sign of much promotion. Yeah,
I have the impression that quite a bit is being done by WOSA, Wines of South Africa. My son lives in Clapham in London, and very close by they've got an excellent wine shop called Divine Cellars. And Greg, who is the owner there, has been very active promoting South African wines, offering special prices, etc. He's also got an amazing selection of South African wines, but he's a small wine merchant. He's not a Tesco or a Marks and Sparks or Morrison's or whatever. And I think if we're wanting to move a lot of wine, that is where it has to take place. It's in the big businesses. Quite often, the wines which are indeed bottled in Europe or in the UK have names that those of us here at home simply are not aware of and don't ever see, which I think in a way is wrong. I think we should, if your name is Michael Smith, you must have your name on the bottle, because at least it gives some sense of where the wine comes from.
David?
Yeah, I think Michael's right on that. Certainly when I've been in the UK, I haven't recognised a single brand in the supermarket. But, the reality is an awful lot of wine has to get sent over in bulk to make it worthwhile for the wine farmer. And there's also a price consideration there. I mean, I don't think the Brits really like to pay much more than £6, £7 for a wine, 10 quid for a special one. So there is definitely some price resistance. And you're in competition with Chile, you're in competition with Spain, Italy, Australia. One of the problems, John, we had here was the uncertainty during lockdown as to whether wine could be transported, whether it could be exported. Nobody seemed to know. And that, I think, really put a spanner in the works for a lot of vineyards. And, if you lose that opportunity, you've got to keep marketing. You've got to keep going there. I mean, Ken Forrest is a very good friend of mine. Ken is normally overseas for 4 months of the year. He can't be now. People expect to see him. And it's the same with many of the other winemakers that you and I know. You've got to keep up that pressure to get the wine on the shelf. On the premium end, as Michael also said, if you've got specialist wine merchants, then you can get your Tholimas out there, you can get your Warwicks or your Villafontes out there, but that's not really going to be a major part of the export market, unless you're lucky enough to get it into a top hotel. So it's very, very difficult. And I really do think that the uncertainty that was caused by the ANC in lockdown contributed a hell of a lot to the problems that the wine industry is finding itself in at the moment.
And not just the wine industry.
And not just the wine industry, yes.
Dwayne, moving on to something that David said at the beginning about restaurants needing to change their offering to move from the very, very pricey, top of the range, European priced, but not necessarily quality, because we all know South Africa's quality is better than any trash you can find in Europe. What do you think our restaurants should be doing to lure us back? I mean, I've had a couple of cheapo meals in restaurants since we were allowed to dine out again and drink wine. In one of them, I had to complain 3 times because the kitchen staff weren't wearing their masks properly. One very often sees not much adherence to social distancing. They aren't very safe environments, I find. Who can help? Is it the customers who should get more irate? Is it the governors who should send marshals around to keep an eye on what's going on? Or is it the restaurateurs themselves who must be really, really more aggressive and aware of the fact that they're not going to stay in business if they have an infectious environment?
That's an interesting question, John. The problem is people go out to enjoy themselves, right? Okay, they don't want to go to a hospital. Okay, so you don't want to be going there and feeling that you're under the microscope and it becomes an unpleasant experience, right? So if that's the case, people won't go. Okay, so it's a real fine balancing act. I know I went to a restaurant recently, and obviously it'd been trading, and then it was, I think, a Sunday afternoon. And it got really hectic, right? And then some people started becoming really uncomfortable because, people were, I suppose, drinking their alcohol, okay? And it got louder and louder and louder. And some people left because they felt unsafe. So probably back to your point, was it well policed? Probably not, okay? But still, people also want to go to a restaurant to relax, right? So if it's not a relaxing environment, will people? So I think it's a fine balancing act. I mean, I know some restaurants who've actually been open in secret throughout lockdown. Okay, all these small little boutique ones in houses and things, they've been open. They just don't advertise themselves. It's virtually word of mouth. and they've done fine. So they've obviously had strict controls in place, and they've been able to trade throughout. Yeah, obviously it's illegal, okay? But some of them said whatever. I mean, I know I went out to the Cradle the other week for a little run, as I do, and obviously the organizer had obviously got onto social media on Instagram and got some kind of influencer. And when we started the run early, and when we got back, you thought somebody had shouted it's all free. Okay, it was packed. Okay, following weekend did the same thing. Police arrived and closed it down. Okay, but it became unpleasant, right? But back to your point, right? We're wearing masks, but you felt so they did really well in their marketing. But people, then it got so well known that the police came and closed it down, which is also sad.
Okay, Michael, just going back to the pricing, the offering. Dwayne has given us his thoughts on the safety side. You've got to make it attractive for people to dine out, particularly as so many people are in so much economic shit as a result of this pandemic. What are your thoughts on that? Are the restaurants trying hard enough?
I think they have to, because you know, as David said, the 7-10 course degustation menu is something that people are just absolutely not prepared to consider anymore. Some of the restaurateurs up here in Johannesburg that I know, fine dining restaurants, are suddenly offering fabulous roast stuffed chicken, which in their wildest of wild dreams in January and February would never even have considered. And yet,
what's the point there? What's the point there?
Well, I think
what's wrong with roast chicken?
No, nothing. No, I think the point is that they are trying to appeal more to the people, and I think a number of them are starting to serve dinner earlier, obviously because of the curfew time. The curfew time doesn't mean that the restaurants need to close by 10. It means that they need to get everybody out of there by sort of 8:30ish or so that they can then clean up and that they can get home before curfew time. But I think people are being innovative. Some of those up here have during the lockdown time were serving meals which they delivered, and now that lockdown is over for them, they're still doing that. So they've still got another income stream. And I think it's the people who are innovative and clever and different who I hope will make it. Okay,
James, I know you don't have any direct experience of what's happening in South Africa at the moment, but just give us your thoughts as a visitor, and hopefully you will soon be allowed to come back and see us. What would get you back into a restaurant, assuming that you don't have one of these mega European credit cards that can buy you the very, very, very most expensive stuff?
As you know, I'm not a great eater. I'm a fairly basic eater. So I always found in South Africa that the restaurants were, whatever range, actually offered very good service. And were well priced, and I thought some of the helpings were way too much. But I found, comparing it with here, I think the helpings are enormous. I don't know what's gone on. I think it's volume rather than taste. It's and I think that needs to be avoided. And I think my family are now in South Africa saying it seems to be horrendously expensive to go out and eat. In Cape Town, some of my friends who'd been there said it was the first time they've been there that they've noticed that even with the exchange rate, it seems to be getting expensive. I don't know, I'll find out next year, hopefully. So I'm fairly relaxed here. I very rarely eat out here. It's not something we're into now. We'd rather have the family around and eat at home and everything, and that's nothing to do with COVID. It's just that I'm at a different age and I want a quieter life. So the girls, my daughters, love going out to eat. But unfortunately, one's in the Falklands now, and the other one's in lockdown in Holland. So there's not much they can do. Although they do, my one daughter in Holland is saying it's very, very relaxed in Holland as far as enforcement of wearing of masks, etc., etc. And the pubs, when they're open, seem to be very crowded. So here we had, as you know, a government incentive that was incredibly successful to get people to go out and eat again after lockdown. And that was Help Out to Eat Out, or Eat Out to Help Out, where the government in effect said there'll be £10 per person off every meal. And the government paid the restaurant that £10 per head. You couldn't get into the restaurants for love nor money. It's now finished. They did over 100 million meals for that. It's now finished. It was just for August. But what has happened is in two things. One is the restaurants are now continuing that with their own 2 for 1 or whatever. This is all restaurants, even McDonald's, even Costa Coffee. It didn't matter where you went. It was, if you were part of that scheme, you were getting that £10 per head. And so that has fallen away, but you've got the 2 for 1, which is now Monday, Tuesday. That £10 Eat Out to Help Out was Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday only. So it didn't affect that weekend. Well, it may have done, but it certainly doesn't seem to have affected that weekend trade. But you've got the other knock-on effect is that a lot of people would go out to eat before they went to the theatre or before they went to the movies. That doesn't happen now because theatre and movies are still in lockdown.
Okay, James. Thanks for all that. Those thoughts from abroad. Dwayne, I saw your eyes light up when you heard the word incentives, because I know that a lot of your business involves advising companies on government incentives. But presumably government doesn't have the money and probably wouldn't be able to justify in a country with so many very poor people to pay people to go out and eat meals. But there is room for the industry itself, for restaurants and bars and so on, to do something more aggressive to get people inside their doors, as well as ensuring them that they're safe, to make it a bit more affordable, a bit more attractive.
Yeah, I mean, so it's obviously a really interesting concept, right? Around government supporting an industry which does need to reignite. I mean, what are government incentives there for? One is a government failure or market failure. Because here we've got both, right? So yeah, has government been giving a lot of money to, I suppose, employees, okay, through the TERS program, the Temporary Employment Relief Scheme. And obviously that industry is obviously still tapping into that incentive because they can't operate. But obviously as they start to reopen, I think, yeah, an innovative scheme like the UK had, I think the South African government does need to consider it because the industry does need some stimulation. Yeah, should they be doing it themselves and working together and having 2 for 1s and all that stuff, and maybe having a lot more online marketing. Okay, I mean, I'm coming down to Cape Town at the end of September to run the Cape Town Marathon. But the reality is I've seen very little marketing coming from Cape Town, maybe joint ventures between restaurants and hotels and the travel agents. I haven't seen any of that, or working together with the Cape Town Marathon. So I think they are missing something, okay? And I think they do need to have a lot more collaboration to get the industry going.
David, you raised this issue of getting people back in restaurants by offering something reasonably attractive. We hear from James that the perception is that Cape Town has been getting expensive, and certainly that's been my own perception. Cape Town and the Winelands. We're not talking about the city in isolation. Any thoughts on what can and should be done, or is aggressive marketing just going to make the economic plight of restaurants more difficult because they can't make any money?
John, it's a very difficult thing because you probably know the Mount Nelson has got rid of half their staff and is sort of mothballed until December. Now that is an icon of Cape Town. If the Nelia's closed, the general mood of restaurateurs and the hospitality industry is pretty low, as you can imagine. So they've got to do something to bring people in. But let me just tell you an example I had. I went to a local eatery this week with a couple of friends on Wednesday and Thursday. They no longer serve at table. You order at the bar after you've had your temperature taken, and they give you a bleeper. And then you go and sit down at the table, and when it bleeps, you go up and collect your own food. And then you order another drink, and it bleeps. Now, that had zero charm, and I will not be going back there again because, look, firstly, I didn't need to leave a tip because there was nothing to tip for, but it was an horrendous experience. As Dwayne said, you go out for the experience. I want to be pampered. I want to be looked after. You know, I want well-informed staff to tell me what I'm about to eat and preferably to suggest what I drink as well. That's not happening, and that's how you've got to get people back in. Yeah, you know, having a temperature taken when you walk into a restaurant isn't actually ideal. And writing your name down and all your collection and all your sort of cell phone things so the secret police can track you down when you've done a runner. It's got to be turned into a nice experience again. And at the moment, sadly, for most restaurants, they haven't got that. They don't actually know how to do that because they're obeying stupid laws, in my opinion.
Michael, you seem to suggest that there is quite a bit of imagination and rebranding and so on. Do you think there's enough?
John, it's quite interesting when David was talking, it suddenly occurred to me that a chap called Alex Dale from Radford Dale Wines, he set aside a number of cases of wine, and I can't remember now how many it was, but I remember being very impressed by the number of wine that he set aside, the number of cases he set aside. And he was joined by some other wineries as well, where they said, right, this is going into the restaurant industry. Buy your vouchers and go and eat, and your wine will be free or whatever. I can't remember the sort of basic, not competition, the basic sort of system. But I thought it was very clever. I also thought it was very generous of people like Alex and the others. I think, you know, if you're in the hospitality business, I would not like the experience that David had. You know, is it necessary to take people's temperatures? I sort of think, you know, if you want to follow up on cases, then maybe having people's names and telephone numbers is fine. But I think that people in the hospitality business have to start getting clever, and they have to find ways and means of getting around all the stupid rules and laws. And I'm sure it could be done. It's just got to, you know, you've got to make the experience of eating out an enjoyable one. If it's an irritating pain in the ass, I would actually far rather stay at home. I mean, I must say, I have been in lockdown since the beginning of March. Not so much as a cappuccino off the premises. So I'm sort of hoping one day to be able to go back and have a cup of coffee somewhere, and hope that it will be enjoyable while fitting in with the rules. I mean, how does one wear a mask and drink a cappuccino and eat a croissant, I ask?
Well, you obviously need a mask with a very big hole in, but that rather defeats the purpose. Just before we finish, one initiative I have spotted and which I admire, people in Stellenbosch, presumably under the guidance of our old chum Mike Ratcliffe, who runs Villafonte and used to run Warwick as well. They have a website where you can click in and get all sorts of offers. Excellent initiative. I did try playing around with the website, toying with the idea of planning a trip down to Stellenbosch, and just found it incredibly frustrating and not very user-friendly. But assuming that sort of initiative can be made more efficient and more user-friendly, it's the sort of initiative I certainly would welcome. Okay, we're almost out of time, but before we go, I would like all of our guests just to join me in sharing what happened when the prohibition ended and they were able to finally rush out and buy something. In my case, I was in the queue at Woolworths at 9 in the morning to buy a couple of boxes of red wine. I was a little disadvantaged financially at the time, so I wasn't buying the good stuff, but I did get those. And luckily, later in the same day, an order that I had placed several months ago with the Warwick Wine Estate finally got delivered after all my stuff had been kept in a warehouse. So, cheers with my Woolies wine, Mr. Bullard. What did you rush out and procure?
Well, I had plenty of access to wine, as you can imagine. Although we weren't allowed to sell our wine, I did have plenty of wine. So what I didn't have, John, I ran out quite quickly, was whiskey and gin, and I put some away for emergencies, but drank it. The worst thing was being wrong-footed the second time round, that Sunday evening when Cyril suddenly announced he was going to ban alcohol again. That was a real problem. So I'm now well stocked up with whiskey and gin, just in case he does it again. You never know.
And Dwayne?
Yeah, John, I didn't go anywhere. I used all the online portals to buy my wine. I refused to go and stand in queues. And I heard some of the queues, especially on the second lockdown and all that stuff. And when all that reopened, people are standing around there in long queues. I refused to do that. So yeah, so I used all the online, and I had a great, pleasant experience. All my alcohol came to me, and it worked perfectly.
Michael, I know you weren't allowed out, so maybe we'd better rephrase or re-strategize the question.
A lot of wine comes in, though.
What did you pour to celebrate the end of prohibition?
Well, I think as a wine writer, I'm very lucky because obviously people who want me to write about their wines send me their wines. But the first wines which arrived from the Cape were a series of 4 wines from Ross Sleet, who owns Rascallion Wines. And this is a new little range of his called With Love from the Cape. And we've had a Shiraz, we've had a Pinotage. Here is a Rosé, I've got a Chenin as well. Really, really nice wines. I don't wish to damn them with faint praise, but they are so easy to drink, so soft and round and ready now and great with food. So we were very happy to receive some wines with love from the Cape.
James, assuming you had been around during the lifting of prohibition, what would you have poured yourself to celebrate?
I must admit, living in Clarkstorp, I don't think the lockdown would have been effective, to be quite honest. And we would have continued along our own sweet way like we have here. But I'm not shall we say, an aficionado as far as wine's concerned. But in front of me, I've got a Pasternom, I've got a Dolphin Bay, I've got a Paarl Heights, and a Holden Mans. Don't know if you've heard of any of those, but they're all South African wines. So Marita and myself will be having one of these for lunch.
Well, thank you for joining us, James. Thank you all for joining us today for what might have been a slightly trivial chat on a very, very important issue. So my thanks to David Bullard, to Michael Olivier, to James Lennox, to Dwayne Newman, and of course to Malcolm MacDonald, who's been lurking behind the scenes, making sure that we all look so pretty today. I'm John Fraser, and that was Semi-Confidential.